Where did you learn this? Learn what? This? V delivered a stinging slap to my ass, forcing a yelp from me. I buried my face in the sheets and broke out into a fit of giggles that nearly caused me to choke on my last bite of ramen. My ribs hurt, but not because of the pain from the accident that V believed still lingered. No, this was a different kind of pain. The good kind. The kind that came with simply feeling normal again. When I finally calmed down, I tossed the empty bowl to the floor and wiggled my ass just to tease her more. A fresh handprint was undoubtedly rising on my skin, but I didn't mind. It was only temporary, unlike so much else. Don't know what you're talking about, V. I'm just laying here with you, eating some ramen and chilling. Bullshit. You've got a preem ass and you know you love showing it off. You expect me to believe you didn't pull the blanket over you simply because you forgot? Fucking tease. Oh, please. Like you're not also? Those V-necks of yours are so low cut you might as well just let your tits spill over the top for all of NC to see. Look like a cheap joy toy sometimes. I quickly regretted that last comment as V rolled onto her side, providing me with a perfect view of those magnificent globes of hers. She puffed her chest out. Fuck, even her nipples had turned into firm points, almost daring me to do something about them. I don't know what you're talking about, Jude. I'm just laying here with you, eating some ramen and chilling. My eyes were glued to her breasts, which swayed with each breath she took. So much for a quiet evening. We'd had our time to connect. Now, it was time to fuck. I wanted to smother my face in those tits and tease her nipples for hours until she was begging to tongue fuck me, to grab hold of those pink locks and ride her face like there was no tomorrow, waiting for that perfect moment when she would stick a finger in my ass and focus on my clit until I came so hard I screamed. I wanted all of it. All I needed to do was get to my bag without being noticed. You've got noodles stuck in your teeth, you gonk. It wasn't the best diversion I'd ever come up with, not even close. But it would work. I only needed a minute. V heaved a sigh and threw the blanket aside, making sure to give me a preem view of her ass as she stood and trudged into the bathroom. As soon as the door closed shut, I sprung out of bed and rummaged through my bag, desperately searching for the capsule I'd tucked away. A wave of relief washed over me when I found it, but it was short-lived when I heard the faint rattle from inside. Only a single blue flake and a broken half of a white pill remained. The last of the ice and beauties. I had been as judicious in their use as possible. The nightmares I endured every night were growing steadily worse, and ever since that night V had taken me to Blue, our sex life had been in overdrive. More than once I had needed to keep her at bay to extend my supply. It would be worth it, though. All things considered, this had been a great day, and when it was all over and we woke up the next morning, we would be reconnected in a way we hadn't been in years. I'd paced myself perfectly, and while there had been a setback or two, I had stayed the course and pressed on. Right foot, left foot. I popped the blue flake into my mouth and allowed the saliva rushing into my mouth to act as a lubricant for the beauty I swallowed down. V was running the sink, which meant I didn't have much time left. Tequila had been her drink of choice this evening, and while I wasn't a fan of the stuff, ironically, because of the taste it left in my mouth, the mixture of salt and liquor would easily mask the bitterness. V emerged from the bathroom just as I gulped down a mouthful from the bottle. Decided to get a head start on things, did we? Now this was cute. V was leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed, doing her very best to put on a sexy, confident pose she'd probably seen in one of the Bushido movies. She was even smirking at me as though she knew something I didn't, as if she had some mystical power over me. Well, if that was the best she could do, I was about to give her the worst case of whiplash she'd ever experienced. Thank fuck the tequila hadn't been put on ice. If it had, the gasp that escaped my lips when I raised the bottle and began spilling the golden liquor over my body would have been a shrill scream instead. If shots of tequila were what V wanted, I'd give her one she'd never forget. I left nothing to spare, emptying the entire bottle over me before casually tossing it aside. The heavy stench of alcohol rushed into my nostrils, overpowering my own scent, which was quickly filling the air. By the time I grabbed the salt shaker and jerked my wrist a few times to scatter some of the white grains onto my skin, V's jaw had nearly hit the floor. Blood rushed through my ears as she awkwardly walked towards me, having forgotten any pretense in clinging to her composure. There they were, those puppy dog eyes of hers. Just as V reached out to put her hands on me, I stopped her. On your knees. I knew my own pupils were blown out because of the ice, but V's had to be just as dilated. Her legs grew weak, and she collapsed to her knees, resting her hands upon her thighs, patiently awaiting my next instructions. It was tempting to simply step forward and give her what she wanted, pulling her face between my legs and keeping it there until she was desperate for breath. But if this was the last time I was ever going to use this stuff, I didn't want this to be a quick fuck. It needed to be special, memorable. I gently grazed my fingers along the sharp line of her jaw and lifted her chin, meeting no resistance. My heart suddenly sank in my chest. V would do whatever I asked her to do. A part of me had always known that, but it had never struck me as hard as it did just now. Fuck the way I want you to fuck. Yes, Judy. Love me the way I want to be loved. Yes, Judy. Believe me no matter what I say or do. Yes, Judy. Do what I want, and I'll give you what you want. I didn't want this, even though my body was betraying me. I couldn't tell anymore if the drops running down the inside of my leg were tequila or my own wetness. But if I didn't want this, then why wasn't I lifting her off of the ground? Why wasn't I telling her what had gone wrong inside of me? You know why, Judy. The strong and confident woman V had fallen in love with was gone. In her place stood a 12-year-old girl who had learned all of life's lessons the wrong way. That sex and power went hand in hand. That emotions were easy to control as long as the body complied with them. My past with Cindy, the way she had hooked me and sold me off for favors. This was who Judy Álvarez really was. A monster indeed. Connection. It's what we both craved, and it was exactly why V was on her knees before me. And where was I at in this moment? I was fucked up, having dosed myself just like those fuckers had done to me, like Cindy had done. I told myself it was so I could get through things and find my way back to normal. But I was such a good liar that I'd even managed to convince myself of it. It was much easier to live the lie than it was to admit the disgusting truth. I enjoyed it. This had to stop, or something would break inside of me. I reached down and took V by the arms. Stand up. V was confused, but did as I asked and rose to her feet. My eyes were beginning to burn. She was so sweet, waiting for me to tell her what to do next. I didn't deserve her. Make love to me, I pleaded. Make love to me like you did that night. Judy. V grazed the back of her hand along my cheek, just as she had done so long ago the last time we had been here. But while there was still lust in her eyes, I could see something else behind them. Something unsettling. Fear. I couldn't stand to look at those brilliant sapphires of hers any longer. Fortunately, V pulled me closer and pressed her lips to mine. I moved in tandem, trying to recapture that moment from earlier in the day. But even as I let out a small moan and allowed her tongue to probe into my mouth, my hands balled into tight fists. Why couldn't I feel like I had before? Every movement she made was deliberate and compassionate. Her hands gliding across my shoulders and over my breasts, pausing briefly to tease my nipples with her thumbs rolling them in slow circles. My body was electrified, every sensation heightened as the ice surged through my veins, making everything seem more real, but I fought against it, even as I felt myself turning even wetter. Judy, you're shaking. What's wrong? Was I shaking? I hadn't realized my muscles were trembling until she had just called it out. What was happening to me? Had I taken too much? That was impossible. It was only half a dose, and my heart didn't feel like it was about to burst out of my chest. What was wrong with me? Just cold is all, I lied, pulling V toward the bed. But I could see her concern for me growing, even as I collapsed on top of her. I had to do something to make her know I was okay, even if I wasn't. She needed me to be strong for her, just like she had been for me. The reassuring weight of V's body on top of mine should have felt calming and told me I was safe. She was so hot. I could feel the slick between her legs sliding against my own, but I couldn't stop shaking. Stop, Judy. What is it? V was looking intently at me now, those blue eyes of hers searching my own for truth. You can tell me. I can't. Don't you understand, V? I can't tell you. This isn't how people are supposed to be. V, I don't. V's brow narrowed, and she cupped my cheeks in her hands. God damn it, those horrible words I'd buried deep down were once again threatening to spill from my mouth. I was raped. I had to stop this. Now, tell me, Jude, please. You can trust me. You said you only hit her with one of those, Bishop? Yeah, why? Not enough? Fuck that, this bitch is sopping wet. Can slide right in. Well, hurry the fuck up then. Shit won't last forever. I got an idea, hang on. The fuck are you doing? Just lubing myself up a bit. There. Now, where were we? Fuck, just look at that little puckered asshole. Ease up, sweetie. You'll love it, trust me. My vision blurred, and a strange fog suddenly descended over my mind, dulling my thoughts. There was something oddly familiar about the sensation, though I couldn't place it. Nothing, I said, confidence returning to my voice as I pulled her closer. I just want you. Only you. Are you sure? This was the only way I was going to get that lease, and now I got my own place. I can have you over all the time now. It's going to be preem, Jude. Trust me. Yeah, I'm sure. Please, V. Just make love to me. Judy, why do I feel like you're holding something back? I don't know if I can do this if I don't know you're here with me. Come on, tell me what's up. You can trust me, Jude. Don't fucking stop. My voice was louder than intended and echoed off the walls. A hungry growl escaped my throat as I yanked her forward and smashed my lips against hers, diving my tongue as deeply into her mouth as I possibly could, forcing a whimper from her as those toned muscles of hers relaxed. That same fogginess had turned into a blanket, enveloping me in a thick layer of protection. At last, I was starting to feel normal again. Jesus, the sheets under us must have been soaked, judging from how slippery I was as my thigh brushed between my legs. V was finally getting into it, her hands moving with more urgency as they reached under my shirt and squeezed my tits. Fuck, that felt good. So good, in fact, that it seemed a crime not to share. Besides, that was how we were supposed to fuck. First, I would get her off, and then she would see to my needs. I forced myself to my elbows and changed places with V, so that I was the one on top, just as she liked. Again, those eyes of hers. I wanted her pussy in my mouth so badly I could almost taste her. Or was that the mix of tequila and ice? It wouldn't matter soon. But first, she needed to want it. And I knew exactly what to do. A quick flick of my tongue across her lips brought a pathetic moan from her that sent a shiver up my spine. I repeated the motion, relishing in the sounds she made as her hips bucked, lifting me into the air. Shit, you're needy. You want me to fuck your brains out? Fuck yes, V breathed huskily. I don't know, I mused, my eyes wandering towards her breasts, which were heaving before my face. Tell me what you want me to do to you. Specifics. V's face reddened, but all it took was another lash of my tongue against her nipple to undo her. I want you to make me beg for it until I fucking cry. Beg for what? Another flick. Oh, fuck. To beg you to fuck me. To rail me from behind till I'm about to come. And then V's voice trailed off, even as I darted my tongue across the sensitive nub yet again. V pushed her chest out like she always did, trying to meet my mouth, and just like always, I kept her at a distance. But I was too curious to leave something like this hanging. And then... what? I didn't know why she was getting hung up on this. How hard was it to simply say what you wanted? It couldn't be anal. We'd explored that side of our kink a long time ago, and while she had seemed rather tense at the time, I suspected she enjoyed it more than she let on. But what else was there? We'd left our straps at home, but that had never been any reason for embarrassment. What did she want? I had to know. She simply needed a little more encouragement. Slowly, I lowered my mouth over her nipple and sucked it into my mouth, rolling my tongue over it as if it was the only thing that mattered to me. Her cry echoed off the walls before turning into an anguished wail as I quickly pulled away. Tell me. V looked up at me with vulnerable eyes. I want you to cover my mouth when I come. I blinked. That was it? To cover her mouth? I could understand the appeal considering V's submissive side and the act itself being a natural extension of a control fantasy. But it just seemed rather trite considering how depraved we could be with one another. You got it, I said, grinning. But first things first. Roll over. V's eyes filled with understanding as she shifted onto her stomach. She didn't need to be told to lift her ass into the air. She'd done that all on her own and looked like a bitch in heat. Perhaps I should have given her the ice. V had been blessed with an incredible body, and while I had always been more of a tits girl, the ass which was presented to me had undoubtedly turned hundreds, if not thousands, of wandering eyes over the years. Those cheeks of hers formed a perfect heart shape and were begging to be spanked, but my eyes wandered toward the pair of lips that stretched between them. It was enough to make me reach up and pinch my nipple, fantasizing about what I would soon be doing in there. Her tits, her pussy, her ass. They were all mine, and I couldn't stop to consider why I felt so uncomfortable reducing her to nothing more than a fuck toy. V turned and looked back at me. Her expression. Carajo. I definitely should have given her the ice, if for no other reason than to see how far I could push her. I shifted on the bed to get myself comfortable and felt her heat radiating off my skin as I brought my face closer to her pussy. She had to be just as wet as I was considering how much her slit glistened in the failing light. It was a sight to die for. But I held back, resisting my every impulse to dive in and fuck her like she wanted me to. Instead, I slowly grazed the tip of my fingers over the back of her thighs, delighted to see goosebumps raising on her skin. Fuck, V muttered into the sheets. No, I replied plainly. Gotta beg for it first. Bringing my hands higher, I traced along the contours of her ass. V shuddered and pushed back, catching me by surprise and nearly finding its home in my mouth. But I pulled away in time and brought a firm hand down upon one of her cheeks, sending a loud crack rippling across her skin. She hissed and lowered her head, her back still obscenely arched. It hadn't been a hard spank, just enough to leave a faint mark. Another followed, this one on the other cheek. I couldn't see her face, but I knew it had to be twisted in ecstasy as I turned the skin under my palm a bright shade of pink. Please. What was that? Don't think I heard you. V might have already started to beg when I worked my hand lower, reaching between her legs to drag the tip of my finger along the length of her moist slit. She whined as I drew away, only to repeat the motion, applying just a hint of additional pressure, briefly flirting with her engines. Judy! I smirked and kept at it, snaking a hand between my legs so I could tease myself. Shit, my lips were engorged and practically dripping. Why was I doing this to her? Why couldn't I make love like I said I wanted to? I was too fucked up to truly experience love. Even back when we had first met, I had been a certifiable basket case, but at least I had kept the lid on nice and tight. Now, every inch of my life seeped with dysfunction, and it was all being held together by the weakest of lies, which seemed to be growing more fragile with each passing moment. A tear suddenly fell down my cheek, followed by another. Please, Judy, fuck me, please, I'm begging you. Can't you hear me? Can't you see how spread out I am for you? Please. I buried my face between her legs. The sob I choked back was drowned out by the loud cries coming from V. I tried, really tried, to distract myself with how preem she must have tasted, but I had only managed one swig of tequila before V had walked in on me. The harsh bitterness from the ice still lingered, along with something else.
Fuck, I'm gonna come. Oh, fuck. Oh, shit. Fuck yes. Swallow it down, bitch.
I couldn't forget. My face was coated in a mix of slick and tears as I lapped away at her, teasing her clit before dragging my tongue toward her entrance and easily sliding inside of her. Fuck me, Jude. Fuck me hard. Something in her voice triggered me to obey. I felt myself moving, shifting onto my knees and dipping a pair of fingers inside her wet hole to fuck her, hard, just like she had told me to. V pushed back against my thrusts, throwing her head back so I could see the side of her face. Sure enough, her eyes were squeezed shut, and her mouth was thrown open in a voiceless scream. I reached out with my free hand and clasped it over her mouth. V's eyes popped open, just as they had done before on the couch. Is this what you want? I breathed into her ear, hastening my thrusts. A muffled moan rushed across my palm. She was trying to speak, but all I heard was a garbled mess of unintelligible syllables. I kept my hand firmly in place and continued to fuck her. Was I going too far? As I studied her face, her wide eyes turned toward my own. Was she really urging me on, or was she pleading with me to stop? I slowed and V bucked her hips wildly, desperately trying to fuck herself on my fingers. Confident she wanted me to keep going, I locked my fingers tightly over her mouth and drove into her as fast and as hard as I could, giving her the railing she so desperately wanted. Come for me, I whispered in Cindy's voice. Be a good girl and come. V collapsed onto the bed and tensed up as I curled my knuckles to reach the front of her walls, which were already tightening around my fingers. The bungalow filled with the depraved sound of squelching and smacking. Suddenly, a long, muffled scream pierced the sounds of me fucking her. V's face turned a deep shade of red as the veins in her neck threatened to burst. Terrified she was about to pass out, I parted my fingers and waited for the inevitable gasp of breath to fill her lungs. But she kept screaming. Her body shook violently, spasming even, until she finally went limp, heaving for breath as I pulled my hand away. Oh, fuck. Are you all right? V managed to look up at me, still trying to catch her breath. There were tears in her eyes. Did she see my own? I'm fucking preem. You've got no idea. It was just what I needed. She rolled onto her side and took my hand into her own. Her gaze was fixed on mine as she brought my fingers, which were still coated in her slick, into her mouth and sucked them clean. What do you want? What do you want me to do, Judy? My throat constricted like a vice. She would do anything for me. All I needed to do was ask. And I couldn't. I couldn't ask her to listen to me as I unraveled before her and the truth finally spilled from my mouth. Couldn't ask her to forgive me for how I had manipulated her and lied to her for so long. Couldn't ask her to understand what I was. Couldn't ask her for love. I retreated to the only comfort I knew, straddling her face and throwing my head back before she saw the agony I was in. You know what to do. My body responded to her every lick and touch just like it was supposed to, like it had been conditioned to. But I wasn't present. I was lost, unable to anchor myself to something, anything. I embraced the monster and began grinding against V's face. It felt so good to lose control, and I hated myself for loving it. She was like a woman possessed. Her talented tongue worked its usual magic as she danced the tip across my clit, sucking on it occasionally the way she knew I liked when I was fucked up. Carajo, I gasped. Eat me, My eyes snapped open. V stopped. What? I looked down, suddenly realizing it was V underneath me. In an instant, my mind concocted what had to be the most impressive lie of my life. Was just saying it'd be a sin to stop. So why did you? I grabbed a tuft of V's hair, smiling as her eyes lidded and mouth gaped open, and brought her mouth back where it belonged. As soon as I felt her tongue, the smile faded from my face and was replaced with a look of absolute shock and horror. What was happening to me? I leaned forward onto my hands so V couldn't see the tears that were now streaming down my face. An awful stab of guilt pierced my heart as, for the first time since I had met V, I faked my orgasm. I moaned and writhed, making sure to quiver and tighten my muscles in all the right places until enough time had passed to make it believable. The usual tap on my thigh cued me to lift off of her, though I wiped my eyes before doing so. Fuck, I whispered, gasping for breath my lungs already had. Got that right. Shit, we should come back here more often. V chuckled to herself, even as I bit the inside of my cheek to keep myself from sobbing. Everything had gone wrong. There was more submerged beneath the waves than the ruins of Laguna Bend than I'd remembered. I'd sought a glimpse of my former self in the desperate hope it would make me feel complete, feel like myself. It had worked, after a fashion. I felt more like Judy Álvarez than ever before. And I hated her. The guilt, the disgust, and self-loathing had become a barbed hook which had caught in my heart and was pulling me back under the waves. I was sinking, I knew that much. But what I couldn't figure out was whether I couldn't scream or if I simply didn't want to.